consistency and the hard work. And I would add to that, and this is true of academic endeavors too, of course. I hope you'll agree.
Absolutely.
Which is that, yeah, the other thing is, given the mental side, earlier we were talking about how satiety signals in the brain and what you think about foods can be relevant. Learning to really enjoy training hard, in addition to learning to really enjoy eating well, not just for the effects that it has on body composition, those two, of course, but just learning to really enjoy the process of training hard and a really hard workout or a really hard paper that you have to sort through, or really digging through a book that's challenging. Learning to really enjoy that, I think, is if there is a power tool out there, it's the psychological end.
And I think a lot of that is getting the confidence of doing something hard, that there's a payoff at the end. And a lot of people, I get asked a lot in my Q&As, how do I get more confident? How do I become more confident? And I'll tell people, you have to do. There's no hack. You can't read about it. You got to get in the arena. And I don't mean like compete in sports necessarily, but like doing a PhD or doing something, just something hard, where you're putting yourself out there and you're saying, this is my goal and I'm going to go for it. You just learn so much by doing that about yourself. And so just what you said, I will reframe things in my mind when bad things happen it's not to say I never get stressed out, because I do. And it's not to say that I never get down, because I do, because I'm a human. But when something bad happens, I actually posted about this in my story today. When something bad happens, I very rarely anymore do I go, woe is me, why did this happen to me? Because you're in the universe, random bad things are going to happen. So instead I say, if I'm not dead, instead I say, well, what an exciting opportunity to overcome an obstacle. And I bet, because in the experience of my life, the biggest lessons and the best things in my life have actually come out of the most challenging, worst things that have happened. And so again, I would never have been able to do these sorts of things if I hadn't taken up weightlifting, because weightlifting taught me so much about perseverance, delayed gratification, overcoming obstacles. And that's why I love it even to this day. And I'll still get butterflies when I go in for a squat session, even though I've been doing it for 23 years.
That's wonderful. Well, it's clear that you embrace hard things. And for people listening to this, obviously it doesn't have to be weightlifting, picking hard things, learning an instrument, learning a language. Challenge is an absolute builder.
And they've actually shown those sorts of things, like when you challenge yourself and also mentally, that I think there was a new study that came out basically showing a reduction in the risk of Alzheimer's and other age-related cognitive decline. I mean, basically like use it or lose it, right?
Yeah, the will, the desire and the will to persevere, no doubt translates to this thing that we call the will to live, right? It's related to the will to live. Well, I think that what you just said, beautifully embodies what most people are aspiring to, which is I think most people actually want to do hard things. They don't just want to have the results. I think that most people deep down have some understanding that their reward system works that way. I must say, this conversation for me has been tremendously rewarding. First of all, it allowed me to meet you in person for the first time, which I've really enjoyed. I'm certain this won't be our last interaction on this podcast and elsewhere. Also, the amount of knowledge that you contain inside you is astonishing. And
there's a lot of stuff rattling around up there.
Well, and we all benefit because your ability to pull from the mechanistic side, again, I think not limited to, but related to your background in biochemistry, all the way through to the impact in humans, animal studies, being able to understand where those sit relative to one another. And then you're obviously a practitioner of, you practice what you preach, and what you talk about pertains to men, to women, younger people, older people, people who are vegan, keto, carnivore. You really are able to net a tremendous number of ideas while staying really nuanced and data-driven. And so I just want to say, for myself and on behalf of the listeners, really appreciate you coming in here today and sharing with us your knowledge. We will absolutely point people in the direction of where they can learn more about you. And one of the places that I definitely want to mention before we part, however, is this Carbon app. And I should just mention, this isn't a paid promotion or anything of that sort. Actually, one of our podcast team members has been using Carbon for a long time. This is an app that you devised, which allows people to navigate the exercise, nutrition, energy balance space for weight loss, muscle gain, fat loss, weight maintenance. I would just like to briefly ask you about that before we conclude. Without necessarily telling us everything that's in the Carbon app, I'd love to know what are the major things that it does and is good for? And then what were some of the key things that you wanted to make sure were in there when you built it? Like what's the sort of logical backbone behind it? Because I think there are a lot of food counting, calorie counting, exercise apps out there. Everyone I've talked to that uses Carbon, including our mutual friend Cigar and Getty, this member of my podcast, et cetera, raves about it. So what is Carbon and what does it do? And what was your mindset in building it? What did you really want to see there that you didn't see elsewhere?
So those listening may not know, but I started online coaching people for nutrition back in 2005. And that was the vast majority of my business all the way up until like 2017. And I had a lot of success with that, whether it be just average folks looking to lose weight or build muscle, and right up to elite level competitors in physique sport. So I kind of had this idea, like, I don't want to say I had the idea. A few people had the idea. What if we could take what I do in coaching and try to automate as much of that as possible? Because, by the time I was becoming a really popular coach, I was expensive. You were looking at me charging. I got to the point where I was charging about $1,000 a month for coaching, right? And most people cannot afford that. And I would like to not just coach rich people. You know what I mean? I would like to be able to help other people. So the idea was to create an app that could do some of this stuff. Now, there's always a place for human interaction, but for people who can't afford that, our app is basically $10 a month. And basically what we wanted to do was set up an app where, think about if you went to a nutrition coach, what would they do? They would probably ask you some questions about your goals, take some anthropometrics, and then they would use that information, maybe dietary preference, and they'd use that information to kind of formulate a baseline plan. That's what Carbon does. So we ask you, I think there's 8 questions in the sign-up flow about your activity, your exercise, your lifestyle, your body weight, your body fat percentage. And if you don't know it, we help you calculate it. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing. And then your dietary preferences. And we use that to come up with kind of your baseline. And your baseline will be, your calories, your protein, your carbohydrates, and fats. And what's different about our app, because apps like MyFitnessPal or whatever will do that as well. What's different about ours is we encourage people to log their weight daily for the reasons that we talked about earlier. And then you can also track your food in the app. And honestly, I think our food tracker is actually way easier to use than most of them out there. What we typically get great rave reviews about is how user-friendly our interface is, that it makes intuitive sense. And so you track your food, try to hit these macros that you're prescribed, and each week you will be prompted to check in with the coach on your check-in day. And then you put in some information, and then based on how you're progressing, the app will adjust or not adjust based on how you're progressing. So, for example, if you're hitting a weight loss plateau, it will sense that, and it will, reduce your calories, or if you're trying to gain weight and you're, hit a plateau, it'll increase your calories. And there's a lot of, back end algorithm stuff that takes care of this. But the fundamental crux of the app is we try to determine your total daily energy expenditure, because that's going to tell us the first big thing we need to know, which is how many calories do you need to be eating for your goal, right? So on the front end, we basically do our best guess based on your anthropometrics. Not going to be perfect, but it'll get us in the ballpark. And if you do know, some people already know, well, I know what I maintain my body weight on. There's actually a spot where you can manually enter that during the sign-up flow. So that's helpful for people who are super nerds like me. But then if you're people will ask, well, do you take Apple Watch data? Do you take this? Do you take that? And no, for the reasons we talked about, that it overestimates energy expenditure. What our app does is it's an algebra equation. Because your body weight, your maintenance calories is your total daily energy expenditure. Your average calories that you eat to maintain your body weight will be the same as your total daily energy expenditure. So if we know how body weight is changing and we know how many calories the person's consuming, we can actually solve for what energy expenditure is, right? And you can see in the app that there's a kind of a maintenance calorie tracker or energy expenditure tracker. And typically after about 3 to 4 weeks, even if the app was off at first, it will have you pretty darn close. Because, like, let's say somebody comes on and their goal is to lose, 1.5 pounds a week or something like that. And the first week they lose 3 pounds. Now, the app actually accounts for the fact that you can lose more water weight the first week, so they probably wouldn't get an adjustment. But let's say the next week they lose 3 pounds. The app will sense that and adjust their calories up, because it will be estimating that their energy expenditures are actually higher than what it had previously estimated based on the amount of weight they're losing. And the same thing goes in reverse. If they're not losing the amount of weight that they're supposed to, it will lower them based on the fact that it may have overestimated their energy expenditure. But that's the first crux of it, is tracking that energy expenditure. And then the next thing is protein. So when the back end algorithm stuff is happening, calories are set first based on your energy expenditure and your goal. So for example, if you're on an aggressive diet, your calories are going to be lower, even if your energy expenditure might be a little bit high. Just because if you're trying to lose 2 pounds a week, you're going to be in a pretty aggressive calorie deficit. So it's going to set the calories first. Then it will set protein based on your lean body mass. Then the calories that are left over will be allotted to carbohydrate and fat depending on your dietary preference. And we have a few different dietary preferences. There's balanced, which is about 50-50 to 60-40 carbohydrate to fat of the remaining calories. Then you have low fat, which is obviously a higher ratio of carbohydrate. You have low carb. You have a ketogenic diet, which is very, very low carb. And then there's also a plant-based option. And within each of those options, still, you can go in and actually shimmy the macros a little bit within a certain range so that you can kind of dial in what your specific dietary preference is. Because again, if we go back to what is going to produce the best long-term results, it's whatever the person can adhere to. So we really try to start with the concept of adherence by allowing people to have the dietary preference that they want. And there's some other apps out there that are good apps. Like, for example, we get asked a lot, what's the difference between our app and the Renaissance Periodization app? And they have a great app. But theirs is kind of more rigid, and it'll say, you're going to eat this many meals and you're going to have these foods at these times. So we're kind of the opposite. We want to give you maximum flexibility. Now, for some people, they would prefer the rigid structure at first. But we find that for most people, giving them more flexibility typically improves adherence over the long run. So that's kind of how the app works. And again, like, there's multiple different goals. It's not just a weight loss app. There's a maintenance, there's a muscle building. So you've got all kinds of different goals that can be accommodated, different rates of each of those goals. And I've used the app for over 3 years now to do my body weight. And like, when I say that it's dialed me in, because I'm very regimented with, logging and logging my weight. So what I targeted to weigh in at Worlds, I got down to the 0.1 kilogram. So fantastic. It was pretty cool to be able to use a tool that I helped develop to actually coach me. So it's a great tool. We did some statistics. We polled 2,500 members, and one of the questions we asked is, would you recommend this to a friend? And 91% said yes. So we on our average, I think our average retention is 7 months, which for an app that costs $10 a month is really great.
That's great. Yeah, as I mentioned, a number of people I know use it. This is not a paid promotion. But I think people need guidance and tools. And what we know about the human brain is that winging it can work, but that the brain will cheat itself often. There's a Feynman quote about this, and I'll get it wrong, and always bad to try and quote Feynman anyway, because he said it so much better. But that we are the easiest, it's easy to fool ourselves, basically, is what he was saying. Easiest to fool ourselves.
Absolutely.
Sounds great. We will put a link to it so that people can check it out. Again, it sounds like a wonderful tool, and a tool that nets a lot of the principles that sit as major themes for weight loss weight gain. I would assume directed lean tissue gain is what most people are after,
Yep.
and weight maintenance because a number of people would like to just maintain. Listen, I really appreciate your time and all that you're doing. Certainly your time and energy and knowledge today, but also what you're doing on the various social media channels, and just the fact that somebody from the depths of academia is out there sharing so much knowledge across so many domains. You're a gem in this landscape of nutrition, and one that people really need to hear from. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
We'll do